Hi everyone, I'm joined by Charly Ou, who recently made top 32 at the Extravaganza by playing pure Dragunities.
Hello everyone.
And what we're going to do today is commentate over some of the replays and replays of some of the combos the deck can do, so that you guys have an idea of how to operate the deck if you were to play it yourself. So as a quick reminder, the reasoning behind that deck was not to build the strongest boards possible with the Amorphage package, for example, but to instead have a deck that has as many extenders as possible, that is as reliable as possible to make his combos, and kind of takes a page out of current Dragon Link, trying to make a good amount of negates, but also keeping resources to make sure they can play on the following turns, which is why we have 2 Spheres, 2 Romulus, and why we're maxing out on cards like Legatus, Glow, and why we are running Armagram. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So this deck list, we worked quite a bit on it, and we know that probably a lot of people will not agree because they all think that the Amorphage package is superior. So honestly, I do think, yeah, the end board is a lot stronger, but the Amorphage package doesn't offer any follow-up plays, and if you get interrupted, there is a lot of chance that you will not be able to do anything the next turn. So we aim to solve most of this issue because the end board Dragon Link is not as oppressive as we think, but their main point is being able to do a board every turn.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why we chose to play this version of the deck.
Yeah, because like the Amorphage package needs a few links in the extra deck that are really only useful for the one combo, and they leave you with no real backup plan, and that's something we try to fix with this list. So this is kind of the reasoning behind it, and without further ado, let's go into some of the combos. So what we have here is kind of the basic combo of the deck, which is just Senatus and anything to discard to trigger it. So here we just chose another one. And that is going to be the very basic combo on which we based most of our choices in the extra deck. So here, the reason we go for Kuz rather than Phalanx is because Kuz's level modulation is very important for making Barcha. Of course, when you're using Senatus, you don't really have to care the ratios you use because you can just fetch the one you need. However, if you have to make your synchro using other ways, for example, Legatus, that you special summon when you have normal summon the tuner, in that case, you actually want to see Kuz more often than Phalanx, which is why we actually max out on Kuz and only play 2 Phalanxes.
So here, Guider is one of the 2 choke points of the decks. So the issue here is that the Guider is a starting point where you start all your combo, because you need to have it in your grave, and you need the extenders, which is here, Baby Rock, to initiate the combo and go into Romulus later. The thing here is Ash, which is one of the most handful plays, can stop your combo, and if you don't have access to Baby Rock, you need to have an extender. That's what we are playing, the 3 Legatus and Divine Lance.
Yeah,
as well as yeah, exactly.
Yeah, from them we can proceed with the combo. If you had extenders, you can actually make Crystal Wing here, which is why people will often be scared of not ashing the Gator, because if they don't, they might actually get locked under the Crystal Wing. But if you don't have any extenders, of course, you have to go for the Romulus immediately. But that is only for the very basic combo that can really play around things. So then we can,
Romulus is the checkpoint.
Yeah, that is the other one. But again, most people are going to be scared of going into Crystal Wing immediately. So oftentimes they're going to hit the Gator instead.
People have to make a gamble because Romulus is a bigger choke point, but if you go into Crystal Wings, your opponent is screwed, and choose to negate the Gator, you have a lot of Rockstars that can go past it. So the opponent will have to make a choice between which one of the 2 to negate. And depending on your deck list, Gator can be a bigger choke point than Romulus, and in your case, Romulus is the biggest one.
So here we're just going for the usual Barcha plays. You're going to see the Guard Dragons a lot in those replays. Getting the Remus in the graveyard.
And you notice that we're not doing the triple burst, that is essentially only the down arrow in the deck.
Yeah, so one of the big advantages of Trishula here is the information it gives you, because once you've triggered it, as you're about to add with Tempest, you're able to know what kind of deck your opponent plays most of the time by watching the top card and their extra deck and removing one of their important combo pieces. If you're only using the very basic combo, like just a Senatus and a discard, you don't really have much agency in terms of materials to make disruptions with. So you're going to be kind of forced into a very specific setup. But the more extenders you have, and you're going to see that in the future combos, the more choices you can actually play around with to make to tailor your board to what you've seen that your opponent plays. So we can, yeah.
As a one bonus is a lot of deck will not be able to play through the Trish, Buster Lock, and the Red Beer. So the reason here is sometimes people will have to scoop to retain some advantage from going into game 2.
Yes,
and if they refuse to scoop, you get see the deck, and you will be able to side accordingly game 2.
That's one of the important parts. Like, even if the guy were to clear your board, the fact that you've removed one of their extra deck pieces can potentially make their own turn weaker. It makes it safer for you to actually go for those kind of lines of play. And then go into the spheres, equip Mistletoe, which lets us bring back the Leviathan, and equip the Buster Lock. And that's kind of the basic board you go for when you can only just trigger the Senatus, which is the Buster Lock, 1 bounce, and Arad Beer. And as you can see, we've put a Remus in the grave, and during the opponent's turn, when they try to play and we can trigger our spheres, we return their card to the hand, and we summon the Armagram, whose attack is about to be put to 0. The important part here is that even if your board gets cleared, you have the Armagram in the grave and you have the Remus, which means Armagram can special summon itself by banishing pretty much everything that's there. And then because you have a Dragunity, the Remus can come back. And as you can see, we still have enough combo pieces and enough good synchros to make. So your next turn is pretty much set up. Something that lists like the Armor Fate ones can't really do because they put all of their eggs into one basket and suffer heavily from getting their board cleared. And
go ahead. Armagram is it's actually 3 negates, so you can actually bait cards, and if the opponent does have no response for Armagram, they most likely have nothing. So you can combo into a skeleton and just wipe the board.
Yeah, you can just play the rest of your turn. You bring back the Armagram, negate whatever's problematic, then bring back Remus, make Romulus, and from there you're just playing for free. That's one of the real strength of Armagram in this list. So yeah, without further ado, let's go into kind of a more powerful one. So yeah, this is going to be a more complex combo when we actually open a tuner alongside Senatus and not just any Dragunity card. Starts off the same.
Yeah, so here, whichever tuner you start with, you discard it to search the other one. And it actually gives more extender when you go into Barcha, because you will be able to summon 2 tuner back from him, and you will be able to access the Dragon combo more easily. So at this point, when the Leviathan comes back and you use PST and LP, you can actually go for more monster to go into Arad Beer and Crystal Wing.
It essentially gives you one more piece of disruption and more choices for what you're about to make.
Yeah, that's right. The end board, you have the choice to make to do between Bordeaux Savage or the Dragon Buster after making the Trish, so you can actually adapt your end board depending on the opponent's deck. So
here making the Crystal Wing, getting Armagram. Again, getting information thanks to Trishula, and getting a search for 1 copy of Mistletoe. Bring back the Armagram for Mistletoe to trigger. And this is where we actually get the choice. Pause it a bit too late, but you get the idea. When you equip Mistletoe with that Phalanx, you have 2 choices. The first choice, depending on what you've seen your opponent play, if indeed their deck suffers from getting locked from the extra deck, you can banish that Mistletoe since it's equipped to bring back Leviathan to its own summoning method. And once Leviathan comes back, it equips itself with the Buster Lock. The other option you have, because you do have Mistletoe and a Phalanx on board, is to go into Boreal Savage equipping the Romulus from the grave. This is if you notice that your opponent plays kind of a more back row deck, and you actually want to have a generic disruption rather than just having an extra deck lock. So something like Glitch, for example, you'd rather go into the Savage. So some small details about that board. First of all, notice that the Savage being equipped with Romulus makes it something you can banish with Leviathan on the next turn to actually revive the Leviathan and go into other synchros once the Savage has outlived its purpose. The other thing that's important to notice is we have put the Amagram in the grave. So unlike the first combo, what we want to summon off of the Heavenly Spheres is going to be Remus, again, so that we have the pair in the graveyard. So that's kind of I want to say the most generic combo, because outside of really bricking, you should always have enough fuel to go into boards like this. And those are the ones that give you more agency as to what you want to make. So without further ado, let's go into the next combo. So this combo is going to highlight something we mentioned earlier, which is that the very basic combo that just has Senatus triggering doesn't really play around hand traps that much, because it's just basically 1.5 cards. However, the instant you have one or more extenders in your hand, you can actually start playing around hand traps really well, and this is going to showcase this. So this is the point we highlighted in one of the previous combos, which is that at this point, because we have extenders that can allow us to make Romulus, we can actually use those two materials to make Crystal Ring immediately. That is going to be our 5th summon, which makes the combo safe from Nibiru. Here we're using Allies to revive the Gaydog and go into Remus, but any other pair of 2 extenders will do the trick. That is going to be combinations of Remus, Ravine, Legatus, Divine Lance, possibly Mistletanes, depending on what you have. So it's pretty easy for the deck to actually get into that position. We're just going to use the Allies to simplify the example.
So here you can see, as long as you make Romulus to search Glow, you can full combos if you have the Gaydog in your grave. So that means that technically Romulus is the biggest checkpoint of the deck. But if there are actually ways to make Crystal Ring before, and the deck is loaded with an extender, which means that the opponent is kind of forced to interrupt the Gator. Because if they don't, you can go into Crystal Ring, and then you make a Romulus that can full combo through Nibiru. So one thing here is technically you still lose to Ashnib, because some people are really good. And the thing here is if you hard open the Glow, the Romulus can be negated, and you don't really care about Ash, so because Nibiru remains the biggest threat. So if you get Ash at this time, you want to have Glow actually in hand, so you can still play. That's why we're playing. We maximize the number of Glow.
That way you can actually accept to get Romulus Ashed, so that as not to get baited and then Nibiru.
Yeah, and even there are points where you can even allow people to draw you, because there are actually ways to play through draw, as long as you have, for example, Fuji Burial.
Yeah, you told me that during the Extravaganza you got like Jolt and Lancia and still managed to make boards.
Yeah, I got rolled once with Cold in my hand. I allowed to get rolled and kept the cold, so I could potentially use it against Lancia or Ash, which the opponent had. So at that point, I was able to use the Ravine to function on Anagram and full combo with that.
Yeah.
And this is why I like this deck, is because you don't lose to Doral, because the Armorfetch deck abuse the Gator, and if you can't abuse Gator, you don't have access to Lechery, and
you lose most of what makes the Armorfetch package good.
Yeah, this deck is able to play through Lancia, it's able to play through Droll, just by making a few adjustments. There was even one case in Extravaganza, I got Lancia, Droll, and Gabak the same turn and still won, because I was able to make a significant board with Sphere and a Whirlwind.
Yeah, I mean, once they've used 3 hand traps, like a significant board is 2 disruptions, that's often enough to stop a guy who hand looped himself for 3.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, like
because
making the crystal ring makes you like safe from a one hand trap. Just having more extenders makes it so you can accept getting hand trapped another time to avoid losing to like Nibiru and Ash, Nibiru and Gamma, stuff like that.
yeah, and because your opponent is hand grouping himself, it's possible to have a board that is not as strong, but you do set up your following turn. Because here, for example, we do not set up neither Rebus or Armagram, but this sphere will give access to Armagram.
Yeah, if it was like a live Dragunity card that you discarded with Senadus, and then the extenders, which happens really often, like you would actually have even more fuel going into the next turn. It is like this is just to showcase a very basic combo plus making Romulus on the side. But that's a very bare bones kind of demonstration. And you can see that we find ourselves in the same situation as before, with Mistletones having equipped itself, meaning we can either make Savage, equipping the Romulus from the grave, or bring back the Leviathan and getting the Buster Lock, because now we know what our opponent is actually backing. So yeah,
the only card you lose to here is evenly matched.
If you don't make Savage, yeah.
Here you can chain Heavenly Sphere to bounce one of your cards, and the sphere then resolve after the evenly match, so it's not as bad.
Yeah, you can do a few things like sphering your own synchro back to the extra deck and then resolving to get resources afterwards and keeping one negate. That's the kind of thing you can do. And that is if they baited the Savage before. But yeah, bottom line is, as long as you have Odd Eyes or two extenders, you can play through one hand trap. And if you have even more extenders or things like Glow, you can actually accept taking the L on an Ash just to not get baited into a Nibiru. But oftentimes people, if they have only one hand trap, are going to be kind of forced to negate the Gator because they fear that kind of situation. And once they Ash the Gator, for example, it's very easy for the deck to just get one extender and go into Romulus and combo from there. Okay, now let's have a look at a few combos that actually do not use Senadus. So what we're going to showcase now is a combo that actually does not use Senadus, as the previous ones did, but instead uses Dragon Ravine, which we play pretty much 7 copies of in that deck. And one tuner as the only Dragunity cards to discard, because if we had more than one, we'd be able to simply search for a Senadus and play from there. So if we only had Dragon Ravine and one tuner to discard and the rest of your hand is staples or hand traps, whatever you want, this is the kind of thing we can do with it.
So here at that point, whatever the tuner you have, you will be able to almost full combo. About ducks here, so we chose to play only one because it's good only if you do start with Ravine and have a tuner to discard, because you do need to have a setup in your grave.
And I mean, the moment you are able to trigger Ravine, you can search the ducks, so no reason to play more than the one.
Yep.
Because it's only good if you're searching it, which is kind of the point.
Yeah, Ravine leads to the same combo as Senatus, but with more resources, so it's actually better than Senatus. At the condition that you have the tuner in hand. So that's why you are playing 5 of them.
So the difference here is that we're bouncing the Ravine. So what we are not gaining in value by not having Senadus, we are gaining it by actually having the Ravine to bounce with Zephyros, which is going to come in handy later on in the combo by letting us a second search. So instead we are directly summoning Dekus from the deck because we need a level 4 to make the Barcha with our Dragon King of Adum, meaning Leviathan is still in the deck, and we are proceeding from there. Now that we have the 2 tuners, that means it's going to be easier to make the Guard Dragon setup. And then we're actually getting our Leviathan. So this is kind of the variation Charly was alluding to. It's at this point when we're searching, because we already have most of the setup, we can actually search for the Armagram to have something we can afford to discard for Ravine, getting ourselves an extender for next turn, and then bringing back the Armagram to summon our spheres. So the situation in which we find ourselves there is kind of the 3 basic disruptions with the 2 cards, but we still have a Ravine active potentially for next turn. We have an extender of our choice in hand, could be Legatus, could be another Senadus, and our grave still has Armagram, meaning on our opponent's turn, we can simply use spheres to get Remus into the grave, and we have the pretty much the full turn with Amagram into Remus and Legatus in hand.
So, and to complete that, so to come back to the ratio with 3 coups and 2 phalanx. So as you notice here, phalanx is only good if you do start with Ravine and nothing else. If you have coups, coups plus Legatus can be full combo technically because it's similar as Synergist plus 1 discard. And the phalanx here, because it's not as important as coups, we chose to play only 2.
Yeah, we need them to be in the deck to do some of the combos, but it's actually not the one we really want to open with.
Yeah, the issue with, let's say, Phalanx plus Legatus is you will not be able to go into Barcher, and without the Ravine, you have nothing to bounce off Zephyros to comes back and have the atomic schools. So Phalanx is only good if you have the right cards along it, which would be here's Ravine or Remus or Terraforming.
Yeah, like Phalanx needs you to have a setup, whereas Kuz is your setup in a way for the rest of the combo. Right, and now for the last few combos, we're actually going to showcase what the deck can do when it opens kind of one-offs and some of the weird hands that people would consider to be bricks. And we're actually going to showcase what you can do with those hands and why most of the one-offs in that deck are actually not bricks if played with correctly. So this is kind of a setup you guys probably had in mind when you saw the very first combo, which is what happens when the one Dragunity discard happens to be Leviathan. Because Leviathan cannot be summoned from the hand by Atom, that means having it in hand can actually be a hindrance if you don't have enough extenders. So in a very simplified game set, when you only have Senatus and Leviathan, this is kind of the things you can still go with to make sure you don't end on an empty board. It's only going to set us up to the 2 forms of destructions, because we have to actually work with very limited resources by actually using Leviathan on the Gaydog itself, just to make sure we can get the Barcha active. So we're getting ourselves the Barcha, and it's kind of similar to the first combo when you're going to trigger the coups multiple times using Leviathan and Barcha, like so, and gets us the Arrowed Beer and the Sphere. So that is a very simplified game state, but the very good thing you may have noticed is we haven't used any of the Guard Dragons nor the Fusion Trishula that are still in our deck. So yes, this is kind of a weak board to make compared to the other ones. That is only if you open very specifically Senatus and the one-off that you don't really want to have in hand. But you still have all of your fuel available in the extra deck. So depending on the extenders you have, depending on what you draw, depending on what you may have set up in your grave, if on the next turn you're allowed to play the game, you can actually full combo on turn 2, thanks to having all of your Guard Dragons still active. So that was kind of a small example, and for the very final combo, we're going to showcase kind of a complete brick, quote-unquote, with a lot of the one-offs you may have seen in the combo, and to showcase what we can do when we actually open them. So when watching the previous combos, you guys may have noticed that there were quite a few one-offs in that list, in Baby Rock, Buster Sword, Zephyros, the one Tempest, the one Leviathan, and you may have been wondering how the deck can actually play when opening too many of those. So that replay that I'm going to let play in the background is going to be an example of what you can do when you open too many of them. Because in a vacuum, all of those cards may appear as if they're actually not really useful to you, but in the context of an entire hand, they actually all play kind of a role, right? Some of the smallest one-offs can actually be discarded by Gaydog anyway, meaning you can use Gaydog to add something that's actually relevant, like a Legatus, and then discard the card you would have added nonetheless. For example, the Zephyros or the Baby Rock. And cards like Leviathan, Armagram, or Tempest can actually be used as searches or summons, so they're not actually dead cards. And depending on how you play the game, those hands can actually do like sizable boards, as you're seeing here.
As you notice here, the Tempest was in the starting hand. So usually what you want to do is use the Fusion to banish the Tempest from your deck to search Mr. Time. But if you do open it, Tempest is a very good card because it gives you access to Remus. Because as most of the deck are with monster, you will be able to discard it. And from there, you can access most of your combos.
Yeah, because technically, like having the Tempest pretty much means we're playing an 8th copy of Ravine. It's very easy to just search the Remus.
Yeah, the Trish Fusion will not have any cards to banish from your deck, so basically you just banish one card that is useless, like here with the Terraforming, and you still get access to Knowledge by checking your opponent's extra deck.
Exactly. So you can see we still made a sizable board. Like we have the extra deck lock, we have two forms of disruptions, we have the Arctic Seal. Of course, depending on which one-offs we open, the board can differ vastly. The one thing I want to stress though is the setup we have in Grey, which is really good because we do not only do we have the Remus and Armagram combination, which pretty much means we're making a new Romulus on the next turn for free. We also have the Tempest because since it got used as a searcher from the hand, we have no reason to use the banish effect, meaning on the next turn, when you actually pay the cost of Armagram to summon it, you're actually going to trigger Tempest, meaning from your grave alone, you have like 3 resources to play on your next turn, which is really strong.
And if you do draw your last Mistletoe in the draw phase, you can actually just summon back the Tempest to have more and more monster. Because the thing here is, because you're playing a second Romulus, you are actually able to go into the second Romulus first, of course. You can go into Glow, and potentially the Glow can be used when you use Mistletoe, you equip a tuner, you make Leviathan coming back, and you can equip it when of your Synchro Monster, and then you can actually activate Glow to special summon back the monster.
Like the Romulus into Glow into Mistletoe can actually serve as a kind of a monster reborn, or something like a Redbeard, which is a very sizable monster and a real threat when you want to actually pressure your opponent for game.
We want to stress here that most of the combo have to the end board is quite strong, but on top of that you have the quality that is set up, and because you're also playing a set Romulus, you do have follow-up, you do have option for the brain game, which most of the Armorphage decks doesn't have, because it's so loaded with cards that doesn't contribute to anything. You sometimes can't even play a second copy of Romulus or second copy of...
They don't really have room for like a plan B.
Yeah, exactly. The decks have a less strong end board, but you do have option for the following turn. If you end up, like let's say your Romulus gets Gamma, the decks can actually do something the following turn, while if you don't have a second Romulus, you are almost screwed up if you don't hard roll the Glow.
Yeah, which is one of the advantages of playing like kind of a more streamlined list. And yeah, we made a really good Grave setup. We still have threats in the extra deck, and we made 4 forms of disruptions with Nibiru as the 5th summon, despite the hand being full of some of those searchable one-ups. So yeah, thank you guys for being with us for those few replays. If you have any questions, write them down in the comments. We'd be happy to help. And in the meantime, I'm going to wish Charly good luck on his future endeavors with the deck.